All right. You know, I like the crooked. I also am going to address, I haven't shaved in about a week. Okay, my name is Evan Strong. I am the founder of In The Image Clothing Company, a clothing company that is so much more than just a clothing company. We are called In The Image Clothing Company because we are all universally designed in the image of our living God, who is Jesus Christ. And we discuss the skeletal system. We talk about how the body isn't about the fat content, it's not about the muscle mass, because those things throughout different times in our lives come and go. But it's about the skeletal system and a natural position that the structure of our body has, and we work out of and do everything from there. All that the musculature of the body does is operate the skeletal system. So, yeah. This video is going to be really cool. This video is going to go along with a video that I personally made for In The Image Clothing Company titled "There is a Lot to Internal Rotation." It's almost like more information on top of that video. So it's going to be wonderful. I am going to personally love this video. I love everything that I'm getting to know about the human body, because that's what we are here at In The Image Clothing Company, is we get our bodies back to natural. The whole point of our company is the fact that we did not design our bodies. They were designed by our God. We then came into this world, and our bodies have the potential to get altered through worldly things. Anything that's man-made that is flat, when our hands and our feet are rounded, there's arches in the feet, the hands have a natural radius to them. I'm going to discuss both of those things a lot within this video. But clothing is the only thing placed physically directly on our bodies at all times, so it's the only thing that has the potential to, and does, alter our bodies to that degree at all times. If it's imbalanced in any way, because we do live on an earth that pulls us directly straight down with gravity from the center of us, being our sternum, behind it's the spine, and our nose are the three things that I mentioned. Being the founder of In The Image Clothing Company, we're about the body. And so staying centered is something we have no say over, or else the body is either using excess stabilizing muscles and many muscles within the body that aren't designed to do these things, to try to stabilize the body and hold it up when it's being pulled physically by clothing being placed on it out of its natural alignment. Also, unnatural things such as materials that are man-made do alter the body. And so like this coat is polyester, and I think other materials as well that are man-made, but times and places is what I always say, using discernment in those times and places. But you know, we're not going to be perfect at always being within what we ideally should be in, which is 100% natural materials. So times and places. The big thing is stretchy. That's one of the biggest things. Okay, no stretchy, ideally. There's just nothing stretchy in nature. The body can't react to it. I haven't, up until today's date, being the 28th of October, 2024, done like a full video only on stretchy clothing. I was planning to yesterday. I mentioned that in the 6th episode of In The Image Clothing Company podcast, which is what I filmed yesterday. I was planning on making that video, and I just haven't done it yet. That's fine, but I just mean, that's going to be a video that's going to be good to make as long as it happens. Because I discuss all the time about stretchy clothing, and I haven't had like a full video geared only around that. So, for In The Image Clothing Company. But I have had a couple prerequisites since before I even founded In The Image Clothing Company, just to allow the body to have a chance to operate natural, right? Just to get our bodies back to as if we weren't wearing any clothing, out of modesty. How would the body work before it was altered? That's what we're trying to get us to, and as close as we possibly can to dwelling within that state of functionality while still wearing clothing, still being covered from the elements, from the weather, still being modest. So, lacing your shoes with the technique for shoelacing that is In The Image Clothing Company's technique, meaning just the one that we use is just a shoelacing technique, which includes tying the shoes evenly over toward the inside. That will just allow your foot to not be altered within the capability of the design of the shoe, right? The sole might still be a little bit different than the natural shape of the foot, which just only works how it works. And that's another big thing to say within this intro, is we cannot tell our bodies what to do. I tell people through these videos that you can try to do that all you want to do and then sit there and have fun with your foam roller and your stretching routines, or you can understand the truth that the body only has one, literally one working actual position that it works out of, and we just have to allow it to do that. Keyword being allow. So pairing the shoelacing with removing all of the tags, stemming within your shoes, they're normally in the tongues, and then up through the entirety of all the clothing that you ever wear. Tags cause unnatural gaps only within the locations that they are placed in the clothing that alters the body's natural position, and they are also almost always nowadays in 2024 made out of synthetic man-made materials that the body doesn't want to have to come in contact with at all if it were to have a say, right? And they're placed within clothing, pressing it directly against our skin at all times. So, okay, those are the prerequisites. That is what In The Image Clothing Company is. Let's get into this video, which is going to be titled Internal Rotation, a closed yet open, right? Closed yet open. Okay, that's the title, closed yet open. Because here's the thing. I've discussed, because a few months ago I made a video titled The Universal Fix, and it was about clothing. It was when I was, very, very first starting. We actually weren't officially titled In The Image Clothing Company. It was just Evan Strong, me making videos at that time. But that's where I was leading up to, was this company. I didn't know that. I didn't even know why I was making videos. But within that video, other than I was just learning about the human body and how to allow it to get out of its patternings from worldly things, but I didn't know it was going to be so big, and here we are. So within that video, I said internal rotation is a closed but open position. And I've discussed so often when I talk about internal rotation, right? Internal versus external. A little bit of context for this video. Most people are walking around nowadays and living their entire lives in a constant, chronic, until fixed state of external rotation. The video I mentioned at the beginning, there is a lot to internal rotation. We'll give you a very, very, very good start of an understanding of what internal rotation within the body is. But at its very, 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 very baseline, which a lot of times this isn't even actually how it is, but at its very base, this is internal rotation of the shoulder capsule, and this is external rotation, okay? But there's so much to it because the body has so many muscles playing into each positioning and rotation that I go into a lot of that within In The Image Clothing Company videos. You can go check out, but I'm going to discuss a lot of it within this one here. So when we talk about internal rotation, I've discussed how it's a closed position of the hand, for example, or the foot, stemming from that literally physically internally gripped arch of the foot with good nails on the toes to support them. It's a closed position that allows so much opening. Like when I stand here, the way I'm going to open my rib cage, the way that I'm going to open my shoulder capsule, the way that I'm going to expand everything is internal, again, like this at its base, internal rotation. And then I can just expand and get very, very, very big. And I've showed before like a kick, like a martial artist, where if you're standing here, to get those hips very, very open, it's internal, like that, internally rotating. So closing yet opening, that's what we're discussing, because here's what I want to talk about. I have a video for In The Image Clothing Company, actually two of them, like a second one, but they're both titled Incorporating a Radius in Daily Life. The hand, I also have a video for In The Image Clothing Company titled The Natural Hand, but the hand naturally is so rounded, as you can see here. I've discussed before, like holding a baseball. It's a quite similar position to where it gives you this hollowing in your palm, a very rounded open palm, and fingernails are very, very important for that to be natural, just because you would naturally have more fingernails as far as the length of them that a lot of people do nowadays, because there's a lot of hygiene myths and people cut their nails so short to where there's no support, and that actually affects their shoulder, so, and the rest of their body. So yeah, and I do have a video that I made that is where In The Image Clothing Company videos are placed, titled How Fingernails Affect Body Mechanics. As far as I'm aware, that's the title of it. So when we do have an opening of the palm, really what that This is why there's a lot to internal rotation, because it's when people are using things that are so flat in modern 2024, man-made things that are so flat, it alters the position of their entire body. The arches in their feet from their hands using flat things will collapse, and the pelvis will be anterior rather than posterior to have that natural stance with the activation in the posterior chain of the body, right? As I discuss so often, emphasizing that small little glute in the side, the glute medius, which really helps with internal rotation of the legs, stemming from the hips down. So here's the thing. Using flat things with your hands takes your hand and trains it. And I always say the hand is essentially the shoulder. The foot and ankle are essentially the hip, and vice versa on both extremities, okay? Meaning using things that are flat with the hands alters the position of your scapula, which is that bone that your rotator cuff muscles connect into to allow operation of the shoulder. And when we're using things that are flat, our hands get in this state of, it's kind of like this, like people's hands, they seem closed. They seem like they have no dexterity and mobility, and that the perception behind that becomes their hands must be like closed down. But I've discussed so often that external rotation is a closing position. Internal rotation, like I was showing a minute ago, is how we open and expand. If you put your hands completely out and try to reach as far as you can, your pelvis will go like this, which is anterior, and you'll feel just binding up through all of these muscles, like down into where your lat is. But really it's just all the muscles of the shoulder all working in a position they don't, to try to open in external rotation. So internal gets you big and open in a good way, a very, very good way. But that stems from a closing, in a sense, of the hand. Because do you see how small, if you will, my hand can get? And if I were to be using things so flat, I can't actually close my hand. And so it's not what people are thinking. It's not what I thought for so long. Because your hands feel sometimes like you can't open them, but the truth is that they are constantly opened, flat, and they need, in order for the hand to close, you can't fully close your fingers together unless your palm gets rounded. Now look how closed my hand can get. But with my hand here, like look at my thumb and fingers in conjunction with each other. With my hand this closed in a good way, my shoulders can be so open, and I just have mobility without stretching or working up to it. But on the other end, if your hands are flat to where you cannot even touch your fingers and thumbs together, because again, since the way that the actual hand skeletal structure is designed, it needs that rounding. To just take a look at my hand for a second, because my hands do work quite differently than most people's do in their current state in 2024, because they're in such a chronically poor patterning that I myself was also in, and I'm still working on getting out of, just from many, many years of using worldly things, okay? So, and positions that clothing has placed my body in as well. These universal patternings, this universal truth that I discuss as in the Image Clothing Company, being the founder, right? So when we try to close our hands when they're completely flat, it's not going to happen. I mean, not that it like couldn't, but the hand is round, and that's just how it's going to work. That's the only way it's going to work. We can't tell it how to do something. And so having it be able to be an open palm, meaning rounded here, you see this? That is the only way you're going to allow dexterity here, which allows natural function up here, okay? This actually can be related to the video that I made for In The Image Clothing Company titled Why Oversized Clothing is Common. because if your shoulders aren't in their natural position to work, the hand, essentially being the shoulder, will then not be able to do its normal thing. Your wrist will go down like this if your shoulders are down, but if your shoulders are in their natural position, then your wrist can get in its natural position, neutral out from the pinky. I have a video for In the Image Clothing Company titled "The Pinky Affects the Entire Body." The pinky finger affects the entire body. And I also have one called "The Natural Wrist," okay, for In the Image Clothing Company. There's a video titled that. So there's a lot that you can see that I have discussed about this, but it's a closing. I just want to really focus on kind of the contradiction but truth of closed but open for internal rotation, because when I always talk about a physically, literally gripped inward arch in the foot, I have a video for In the Image Clothing Company titled "Toddlers Are the Natural Example." And I discuss in there how you can watch a toddler walk and watch their feet. And toddlers have immensely, that's not quite the right word, toddlers have wonderfully healthy feet. And they have good gripped, internally rotated arches like this, which travels up their legs into internal rotation at the hip, into a good posterior tuck. Well, a lot of times diapers and pants and clothing that we place on them doesn't allow that natural position to be so natural, but they're just so much closer to it because they've had less time within the world to get altered by those things as adults have, or just anybody who's older than them, right? So when the feet grip, it looks, I've talked about this before, the feet and the hand are so similar. The hand grips like this, and the foot's doing the exact same thing, right? The hands and the feet of human beings are so very similar in their operation. So having this rounding here, very similar thing happens in the foot, because there's actually not only that arch forward and back that we think about a lot of times when we think about like arches within feet, but there's actually an arch this way as well as there is in the hand, right? That rounding here on the forefoot of a foot, and a very naturally healthy foot. Again, look at toddlers if you'd like to, if you do have like toddlers in your family is what I'm saying, or like siblings or whatever, just because that way there's somebody there that's probably got a quite healthy foot naturally because they haven't been altered to as much of a degree as a lot of other human beings. But what I'm saying is there is an arch within the feet that goes horizontal, as far as like if your feet are forward, there's an arch that's going this way as well as going, you know, forward and back, if you will. So yeah, what I'm saying is a naturally healthy foot to allow opening of the hips, to travel up a naturally neutral curved spine, which is that slight curvature rather than this like excessive anterior and then curve of the body into external rotation, which I've described so often within my series for In the Image Clothing Company titled "The Truth Behind," the video titled "The Truth Behind the Core." I went into that a lot, where I discussed how the angle of pants allows just a naturally activated core. And anyway, what I'm saying with that is that naturally gripped inward foot is a closed foot. If you were to think about the toes, because I actually did a video one time as well titled "Barefoot Shoe Truths," and I also have my video for In the Image Clothing Company titled "Shoe Checklist," where I go over, it was the 100th video for In the Image Clothing Company that I personally made, being the founder, and I went over things within footwear that are kind of just like musts to allow the foot to be natural. But within those videos, I discussed how you don't want your shoes too wide, or your toes will like spread out like this. And there's so many myths within barefoot shoe communities, and there's toe spreaders. That's a literal thing where people, and I'm not mocking it because I almost purchased things like that when I first started getting into barefoot shoes, which is one of the things that got me, you know, to where I am now with my understanding of the human body, was starting to wear barefoot shoes. That's how I discovered our shoelacing technique and tying evenly, you know, for In the Image Clothing Company. But that is just absolutely terrible for the body, like unreal kind of terrible to spread your toes, because arches of the feet only can activate if they are gripped inward, and spreading them does the exact opposite. So closed but open, because gripping those feet inward, you can't see my feet. That's okay, because I also have a video for In The Image Clothing Company titled Natural Walking Gait. And I showed barefooted in the grass, it was summer, just a couple months ago, my feet walking, and I showed how the feet naturally grip in an arch inward, and that's what I showed, is that they close, the feet close inward. So, yeah, because when you think about muscles contracting, they need to be, well, not that they need to be, but that's what contracting means. Contract means coming like toward. If you have this end and this end, like a bicep, this end and this end contract to activate the muscle. And so if feet are being spread, they're not going to be able to activate, because muscles have to contract internal to activate. Hands, using things that are flat, takes that natural radius that, I mean, because if you think about just all of your fingers coming together, well, the point is just put all the tips of your fingers together and you will naturally have a rounding in the center and everything will be very closed. But then that's where your neutral wrist comes from. Like, look, my hand position doesn't move, but my fingers will go from touching all of these to just pointing my pinky out. Like my hand position, like I'll put my finger here so you can see, it doesn't move. But if I go from this closed, nicely closed, meaning allowing the rest of the body to open into internal rotation, this nice closed position, I won't move my hand, but I'll just stick my pinky out so I can show where the neutral wrist is. I'm already in that position when my fingers are like this, closed, right? Watch this. Nothing moves, but I'm directly straight out from the pinky, neutral wrist, right? So a closed body, like I've talked a lot about martial artists. I've talked about how I fanboy over martial artists because of the way that they understand the workings of their own personal body. Our bodies being the only thing that we're actually promised in this life. Everything else comes and goes, but if you don't have this physical body, you don't have this physical life. That's what this physical life is, right? So we got to take care of it, but we can only do that by allowing it to do what it does. We can't tell it. So what I'm saying though with martial artists is I talk about, I think it was within my video for In The Image Clothing Company titled The Truth Behind Push vs. Pull, and I discussed how the human body's designed and set up to pull. And even in this, that's a good thing to say, because when you're pushing, it kind of implies opening your hands in a sense, right? I mean, you're not going to push with your hands closed because you can't. I mean, you have to get like leverage on something, and opening your hands now closes off your shoulder and takes your pelvis into an unnatural position. So yeah, this is cool. I didn't know for sure what we were going to mention within this video, but I love this. Pulling, the way that the body's designed to do things, yeah, set up to do things is what I was kind of saying, is a closing of the hands. Pushing, dropped, external. Pulling, closed, internal. So anyway, what I was saying though with martial artists is their whole body is so open. Their hips are open, they can just throw a kick at any time because they're naturally activated already throughout their whole body. But they're in positions where they're open but closed, but like in a nice rounding, loose closed, right? And so like a boxer, I discussed this within that video, I love this. I said how boxers are actually very closed off. And I said, I don't care who that offends because it's true. If you go like this and you try to lift your arm, you're going to get pinching all up through your shoulder. I mean, because in order to get your shoulder in a position where your scapula is actually in its natural neutral spot, and I know what I'm talking about with this, I just say that because I'm not trying to claim something. For In The Image Clothing Company, I have a video titled Shoulders Naturally Sit Behind the Body, and I went into very, very, very great depth within that video on the anatomy of the natural shoulder. Foundation wise, like if it hadn't been altered or the rest of the body, because if something within the body isn't working correct, something else and many other things have to compensate to just continue to work or try to. And so anything even down at your feet, if those are altered, then you might feel like boxing could be something that's sort of natural. But an open natural arch, open meaning closed, gripped, right? Contradictive, but true. That will then take your hands and do the same thing. Because look, now here I'm open. Here, it's very similar to having the hand flat, using flat things. The shoulders are closed. But when the hands are closed, meaning like more toward themselves in a sense, not that they're closed, but kind of, yeah, I mean, they are. That's what this video really is it's a closing to open. So a martial artist, you'll see these open hands. That's funny because a closed together makes an open palm because of the rounding, okay? Closed, open, but if you were to try to have it be like flat, which you would potentially think of as open, quote unquote, it's actually now very, it can't move. You know, I mean, it has to have that rounding to allow it to just, I mean, just because you'll feel this up in here and up in, you know, the place I was mentioning up in here. It's just because the body works as a whole. So a closed position, closed. Yeah. Closed but open. That's you know, closed yet open. Internal rotation is an opening with a closing on the extremities. Just a big thing is then it's working in line. I mean, if your arm's coming straight out and your hand's like flat, well, now you can't be in line. I mean, try to straighten your arm and again, just binding. So allowing it to be in line is kind of what you're emphasizing by closing that hand, right? So yeah, okay. Yeah, one thing I'm going to discuss really quick, and I'll probably do an entire video on it, probably, no promises, and it doesn't matter if I do or not, it's just to be something I could for In The Image Clothing Company. But when people are doing workouts, and I'm not even saying to ever work out, I mentioned how we shouldn't have to stretch, and we shouldn't have to do any kind of workouts to get the body to do what we need it to do in our daily lives. We just need to stop the restriction, and no matter how bold that sounds, I quote unquote prove that with what I discuss here at In The Image Clothing Company. There's no dispute, you just have to see what's going on. So what I'm saying though is when people do workouts, which I've done in the past, I'm not trying to be accusatious, but it's not necessary. It's not, and it's actually more damaging in the ways that people are doing it, even the ways that I was doing it as well, than any way beneficial for the body at all. So again, flat, picture a barbell, picture a dumbbell, workout equipment, right? If you're not in any kind of workout community, I'm just talking about like those little weights you think about, you know, that has a little bar and a weight on the ends. If it's flat, now your hand is flat, and your hand does not work flat. Your hand works closed but open, rounded, right? So if you go to the gym, don't let me tell you what to do, but universally for the human body, gym exercises are actually very damaging from an actual foundation of the way that the body operates before altered. I mean, this is just truth. I'm not trying to convince anything to anybody, but again, I've discussed all this in such depth to where I've said before, like, you can get anatomy experts watching In The Image Clothing Company stuff that I have personally made. I mean, I'm just discussing truth. People are just very out of touch. Not an accusation, I also was, but the body only works how it works, and the hands need to be rounded. So anything within any kind of gym is usually very flat. Even doing things on the floor, very flat, versus like if I were doing it in the grass, which is natural, there's a lot of texture and rounding that the hand can then you know, kind of move around and work naturally. So yeah, this is another one of those times where I'm gonna word it this way because this is how I word it. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you, because we are universally designed skeletal system operation wise, I can tell you what your body doesn't do, and I can tell you how to allow your body to do what it does do. Okay, this is another one of those moments where no matter how weird things that I'm saying sound to you at your current understanding, they are true. I didn't know these things at certain times in my life, but a really big one is the technology that we have, that we hold in our hands, that we put in our pockets. Those things are very flat, very slippery, smooth. Got videos for In the Image Clothing Company titled The Body Loves Texture. And then, yeah, the ones about the radius that I discussed. Those little pieces of technology that are so commonly used, that's actually what I'm filming this video with. And there's times and places, right? Again, with discernment placed in. It's a beautiful tool, but if it's altering the workings of your body, if it's altering your hand, it's altering the rest of your entire body, okay? Now your scapulas are really big. The rotator cuff, the muscles that go into this flat bone on your back that needs to be sitting in its natural position. I mean, I'm so bent over for like how tall I am, right? This is where the camera's at. And I've been like at that height for most of this video, meaning my shoulders are in a natural position. My gripped arches are, I love this, closed but open of the hips, right? My hands, you've been able to see the position they're in. And so what I'm discussing with that is, oh, there's people talking. I was like, what is that sound? I thought it was coming from my phone as I was filming a video. No, that's what I'm discussing, is these little pieces of technology. It's a phone. I just don't like to put emphasis on it, right? But that's what it is. We use them, and it becomes this whole thing about, you know, well, look at this, for example. When I'm like this, there's a gap in my hands, like this. See that rounding? I'm not doing this and trying to get there. I mean, I can, but the hands, because what happens, that's beautiful to see, okay? When you do have that rounding of the palm, or, you know, where the fingers come in to meet the palm right here, that natural radius that I always talk about for In the Image Clothing Company, that's what I'm discussing when I talk about radius within the hand. When you go here and there is that natural slight opening of the palm, it activates the muscles of those scapulas, and of, you know, you have your upper, middle, and lower traps that are between your scapulas. You have those rhomboids between there, all the muscles that go into your rotator cuff, and just anything that's playing into that. This little opening of the palm, this natural, just activates your shoulders. And so if your shoulders are so very deactivated back there, and that could be through clothing, through tags in the rear of clothing, through oversized clothing, just putting your shoulders in a lower position than they would naturally be in. I have a video for In the Image Clothing Company titled Natural Collarbone Angle, and that's where I discuss why it's important to have clothing that actually fits, like tops, right? Yeah, man, this is cool. A big thing to see is this opening here is natural, right? It's just the shape of the hand. And when you're using things that are flat so commonly, this goes to there. Now I'm exaggerating it so you can see it visually, but this opening, which is the same as my feet, natural open arches, that would never be allowed to happen without In the Image Clothing Company's shoelacing and tying technique. It's not my opinion, I'm not selling something, it's just a shoelacing technique. We don't own it, but it's the only way to allow your foot to be natural. So if your feet aren't natural to begin with, your collapsed arches within your feet will take your hands with it. So now this nice closed, yet again open throughout the rest of the body position will go from rounded, which is what allows it to be closed, yet it's really an opening of like the, I don't know how to really describe that, but just what I've been describing within this video. That won't be allowed to happen if your feet are collapsed, those natural arches. And so that's your shoelacing, that's the tags within the tongues of the shoe that don't allow that physically gripped arch to grip, because that slippery tag will then like not really push your foot down, but your foot will sense it and kind of like collapse. And again, like look at this. Collapsed arch, this is not my foot, but the same thing's happening within the foot. Collapsed arch, look how flat. Gripped, rounded. Do you see? Like if this is the ground, this is my foot. People in external rotation, flat feet. gripped, literally physically gripped inward. Good nails to support, right? That's what they're for. One of their many functions: nails, toes, and hands, fingers. Yeah, that gripping will cause that rounding. And that's just, I mean, you can just see it. You can do it with your own hand, but only to a certain degree. Literally, because if you are in such a patterning to where you have been using flat things so commonly, your hands will only have a certain amount of range of motion within them, as mine did, until I have been working them out, quote unquote, meaning just those one-time releases that I talk about. Because we don't give exercises, we don't give stretches here at In The Image Clothing Company, but I discuss a lot of the time, if you're in a patterning for so many years, just X amount of, who knows, any amount of time to create a patterning, a lot of times there is a one-time release of stuck scar tissue or tense muscles that has to happen. And then as long as you don't continue doing these things that are putting your body into incorrect patternings, then you will never have to do those releases again. It's literally a one-time thing, as long as you know, change your approach to things that are unnatural for the body, right? So yeah, yeah, closed. And I think just a really big thing to see is, you know, when we talk about like the core, for example, when we talk about having a center line, it's not a belief, but it's just gravity. I mean, right now, I have to be, I mean, my feet are about this far apart. Like my right foot's here, my left foot's here. My feet are about this far apart. I have to stay with my center of gravity in the center of my feet, or I'd fall over. Because I'm hunched over, I'm in an activated core position, just naturally how the body would work, just because I allow it to, through clothing and through these things I'm discussing here with the radiuses within the hands and the feet. But what I'm saying is, when we think about internal rotation, when we think about the body, when we think about us as individuals, as our own beings, there's a center to us. And so closing, like I was saying with the arm, like closing to that center of your arm, rather than trying to like use something flat, like your knees. Oh, well, that's beautiful to see too. Your people who have like such emphasis on their quads, this muscle here, right? The thighs, the front of your legs. I've discussed so many times within so many videos for In The Image Clothing Company how there is very little to no actual functional strength within the front of the legs. And the reason people are getting such large quads is because of the position of the rest of their body. Stemming at the feet, of course, just because that's our foundation on a earth with gravity. But the angle of the pelvis, the shoulders, tags within clothing, things within the pockets, the things that I discuss, right? Always at In The Image Clothing Company. Those are things that I always discuss. Within every video, something within all of that is mentioned. So the point is, wow, yeah, this is really cool. When your hands go flat, you put emphasis on the front, the anterior part of your body. And that's just not how it's designed to work. It's not me telling you something. I don't get to decide that. You or him or her don't get to decide that. But the body, because of the way that it works, muscles will be in a constantly like deactivated, turned off position if you are feeling activation within your quads, because they should do very, very little. Yeah, so yeah, allowing things to close on the extremities, hands and feet, will then allow opening of the hips, opening of the shoulder capsule, and opening of your airway, because this position here, now I have a neutral neck and spine, and my airway is open. Otherwise, you're like you can't breathe. And I actually have a video for In The Image Clothing Company titled How Clothing Affects the Trachea, which is this airway tube here, same tube that food and water, any kind of liquid go down, right? So same thing. I mean, if your hands aren't in their naturally closed yet, in open position, meaning just you know, that's, nails really are so important for that, because that alone, just having your nails too short to where the ends of your fingers are wrapping around them, will cause them to work in a position that's more like flat than their natural like dexterity. So man, yeah, I mean, there's just a lot that goes into this. So And I've talked about before how we don't want our footwear too narrow, because it's going to just squeeze your pinky toes and just alter the way that your feet would naturally grip the ground. Because as I've talked about with the pinkies and how important they are, pinky finger, the pinky toes, because of the way that a natural stance is, it's on the outsides of the feet, just like how a neutral wrist is on the outside of the hand, being that smallest finger and the smallest toe. We don't want our shoes too small, because then it's putting pressure where the natural stance is. But again, if they get too wide, then that natural closed, gripped arch falls to try to meet the edge of the inside of the shoe. So, yeah. But anyway, what I was saying is we need to get to the center of us. We are our own being. We are individual. This is us. Like our whole everything is within us, right? Again, this is our life in this physical sense. And so we need to stay within us. And that's how we get there. Open, closed, open, whatever you want to describe it as with the hand, but just meaning together so that everything can open internally. There's a lot to it. If it doesn't make so much sense to you watching this video, that's all right. But I love this a lot. So yeah, anyway. And that's why there's so much disassociation within the world as well nowadays in 2024, because people are in such a chronically externally rotated position to where it's almost like this. Like, look at my eyes. You know what I mean? It's almost like you're falling into like who knows what out there. I talk about that, where we need to stay within ourselves and look at the closing but opening, right? It's anyway, it's beautiful. So, and I noticed that so much. Like when I clasp my hands together, it's like this, and when I used to clasp my hands together before I've gotten them back to, at least to the degree back to natural that I have currently, it would be more of like this, like a flat sandwiched together. And my shoulders, again, aren't active, and everything should always be activated constantly. That's how we're going to use the least amount of energy within the body, is to be in a constantly activated state of all of our muscles together working as one, right? Working as a whole. And so allowing that to happen is by keeping an open palm naturally. So, all right, check out In The Image Clothing Company. This is what we talk about. We have In The Image Clothing Company podcast. It's beautiful. We discuss the gospel of Jesus Christ within that podcast, and I love it. You can find that where you find your podcast in audio form, and at least up until the last one we filmed, it's also been available in visual form, where you find these videos for In The Image Clothing Company. So, all right. Yeah, because even just that natural posterior tuck as I was standing before I tried to like adjust so that I could show it again, this natural posterior tuck of the pelvis, that's in a sense a closed position. Closed core means open body. Open in the sense of mobile, functional. Because if your core is open, yeah, that's so cool. It really is contradictive and true, because closing of the core implies opening of like the rib cage. If your core is deactivated, your shoulders aren't in a good position to open your rib cage. Ideally, we breathe in a 360-degree expansion just naturally, and that's only going to be allowed to happen if this core is quote unquote closed, meaning contracted, meaning activated, so that the shoulders can then be in their position. And see, when I go back here, my hands do this quote unquote closing, right? Because they close together, but it's just in a natural position, right? Natural neutral position, allowing my shoulders to open. It's really, really cool. It's really cool how simple yet complex the body is. There's so much contradiction. It's like within the gospel of Jesus Christ, there's so much contradiction in there. Stuff that's like, it sounds so opposing to itself. but it's just how it is. It's really cool. So anyway, closed yet open, naturally internally rotated body. And I'll mention it in here just for some context within this video. I talk about animals, right? I relate human beings in the physical function to animals, because when you look at animals, especially like wild cats, bears, frogs, well, I mean, many animals, it's very easy to see. Animals naturally dwell within internal rotation, and see this natural rounding here. If it's flat, my shoulder from up here is right here, it's internal. If I just flatten my hand, my shoulder, the activators, at least, even if it's in the same position, the activation goes from internal rotation to external rotation, meaning just different muscles turn on or turn off depending on the position of my hand. So that's why and how I always explain that the shoulder is essentially the hand and vice versa. But what I was discussing is, wild cats will walk in internal rotation, and you see like a lion or tiger, and they step like this, and their hand is going internal, their shoulder is going internal, their scapula, as you can see, moving in so much motion because they're internal. You don't see them walking like this. No motion in the scapulas, external rotation, things closed off. It's this open, gripped. I mean, cats, they're climbing trees with their claws, like tigers, panthers, whatever it is. If they weren't allowed to have a rounding to their paw, they couldn't grip around round trunks to climb them. If their hands were flat, well, they'd have no motion in their shoulder, but they would also have no dexterity around the trunk of a tree, okay? So, rounding is essentially just look at my hand, it's essentially a closing. But it's confusing because it's an open palm as well. So, yeah. Anyway, I want to just make sure that I say all that I need to, like, within this video. We'll talk about what we need to talk about in future videos for In The Image Clothing Company, but I want to make sure that I discuss all that I need to within here. Because when your hands are so open constantly in this like flat, weird open position, your forearms cramp and like quote unquote close off, right? Your rotator cuff gets so much bound up muscle in it and like quote unquote closes off. If one thing is doing something it's not supposed to, the other thing is going to do it, but on the opposite end. Meaning this should be closed, this should be open. If this is open, this will be closed. Okay, that's cool. I just wanted to be seen. Just for the sake of, I'm only showing this to like give information, right? For other people to learn about the body. So I just want to discuss it the way that it needs to be shown. Yeah. And yeah, because a big one is the thumb and this pinky, and I discussed that within the video about the hand for In The Image Clothing Company, where this muscle gets so bound up and these muscles get so like bound up and abnormally shaped, so it's like in an open position, right? Meaning the hands are like being forced to be used in such an openly flat, weird position rather than this like nice position. So man, I want to say all that I need to, because this video is really big, it's really cool. And so I've just mentioned so often about incorporating a radius. So yeah, I mean, just because my hands look like small, right, when they're so mobile, and the less mobility people have, the more they look like they got these big chunky hands. And you can see that within like farmers and stuff. I mean, a lot of people think that they just have chunky hands. No, I mean, your body can be shaped however your own specific body's shaped, but what's really normally going on is you're in such a chronically poor position within the body that your hands look so thick and chunky because they're in just a flat, non-workable position, And so stuff like that happens where the muscle just gets excessively large, being used in a position that it's not actually designed to be used in. That's really what's happening, seriously. So yeah, if you've got like, you know, yeah, I mean, that's good. I think that was the last thing I needed to say. That makes, yeah, I feel content. So yeah, I'm blessed. As far as like, I'm grateful, I'm aware of how blessed I've been to be given this knowledge and understanding of the human body. I haven't read books and like just done research on the internet. This is, I mean, it's personal experience, it's prayer, it's revelation, I'm where I'm supposed to be. You know, I'm supposed to be where I am within the Image Clothing Company, and I'm grateful to have been able to found this company, and I'm excited for where it goes, because as I've said so many times, it's not about selling clothing, because as of today's date, we don't even have any clothing available, and I've made over 128 videos averaging somewhere around a half an hour in length for In The Image Clothing Company. It's not about sales, it's not about what I can get out of this. I'm speaking and discussing universal truths for the world when people don't know these things, just as I didn't until I learned them. So it's a very, 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 very big gift to be able to know all this. So thank you. I'm going to discuss real quick where clothing needs to sit on the universal human design, just to allow the body to work natural, right? And I'll do it on one foot, just so that you can see that my body works well. Not because of me, but because what I'm discussing is true and it applies to all humans. So pants need to sit entirely above the hips, slightly higher in the front than the rear. The shoulder seams on tops, they need to sit behind that little bone on the top of the shoulder, and then the seams at the edges of the shoulder should ideally just be right at the very edges. That's just where the skeletal system does its operations at. And so universal, right? No matter height, width, gender, we have a foundational skeletal system that only does what it does. Okay, I just thought it'd be kind of funny. Not funny, but kind of like, you know, just stay on one foot during this. I mean, I've discussed this. If you want to see more of me doing like physical function and stuff like this, explaining and showing how the body really should just work. I mean, I've gone through major things, right? 2 full open heart surgeries. I just mentioned that occasionally, nothing to do with like you need to know anything about like my personal experience, but just so it's not like I'm trying to make some kind of claims. I've been through some big things. So the point is, I also have a video for In The Image Clothing Company titled Natural Hip Flexor Function. Naturally Functioning Hip Flexors is the title of the video. So you can go check that out if you'd like to as well. Okay, thank you. Like I said, today's the 28th of October, 2024. My name is Evan Strong, the founder of In The Image Clothing Company. And this is what we do here. It's stuff like you have seen in this video. So say hi to the jet. It's going straight over me. Yeah. I'm excited for like meetups and stuff, and I've discussed that a little bit. I don't know as of like today's date, exactly how we're going to schedule those kind of things, but sniffled. But I'm really excited for that kind of stuff where, you know, we can actually get together with people and talk face to face about this kind of stuff, you know, and spread this information, you know, grow our company, but not for our company, not for me, but so that people can, you know, have a community, have a place to kind of come back to, like a central hub type of thing, you know, in the Image Clothing Company, to where we can all learn together and grow and understand our own bodies, because we are universally designed, right? Within our very slight differences, if you do have surgeries, deformities, amputations, right? Those are things that I mentioned, or whatever it could be, but still, I mean, the majority of the body is still going to be the same. It just has to do what it has to do, because if we're alive, we're operating, and the body only does what it does, right? So anyway, yeah, I'm excited to build this community, build this team as well. As of today's date, still me, just me. That's all it's been up until now. And I only want to ever bring the right people on here. That's not any kind of like, you know, condemning anybody as if they're like not good enough to be on the team, but it's just, you know, it's got to be how it's got to be and who it's got to be for it to be what it needs to be. There's just a lot of like alliterations, but yeah, no, I'm excited, you know, to grow the team. To just, yeah, it's gonna be great. Okay, so thank you. And that's the cool thing about In The Image Clothing Company is when I say share it with your friends, or when I say let's make this big, or when I say let's spread this, it's different than most other people. Not that I'm talking down on anybody else's companies or anything, but what's different about us is it's universal. It applies to everybody. And so far, everything that we've ever done, just all of these videos that I've made, are just free. You know, it's just information, regardless if you have to pay or not or what. In the future, if we do have certain things that we charge for, or, you know, whatever it is, that's not really the point. But the point is it's universal, right? So anything that we discuss about the human body will apply in some kind of way to every single human. And so that's what's so cool about what I've been allowed to kind of like drop into, my purpose, if you will. Seriously, you know, I just don't want to make it silly, but it's, I mean, really, you know. So that's what's really cool about this, is every single human will benefit from what we discuss here at In The Image Clothing Company, because we discuss truth. It doesn't change. So thank you. It didn't stop. Thank you. Read the Book of Mormon if you'd like to. Read the Holy Bible. Learn who Jesus Christ is and who he is to you as your God, and he's there. That's what's so cool too, is the podcast is beautiful, man. Just to have a place where we can have just like real discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ. I love that, because I need to stay grounded, you know, and I need to stay centered, and that's how it's going to happen, you know, is just always remembering how we're allowed to do anything or be anything, or who's in charge of everything. And so, yeah, being able to really, you know, just kind of stay humbled, kind of, you know, yeah. Anyway, so both of these things, meaning the feet and the hands, everything within this video applies to, as far as that closing position yet open position, right? So like right now when I'm standing, I'm so open of the hips, but it's because my feet are so like inward like this together. So anyway, I just want to really make sure I say all that I need to. I mean, even, you know, when you're doing things with the hand, just like with the feet, I'm standing so far on the outsides of my feet right now. With the hand, it's the same thing. When you are doing things straight out is that pinky. And so when you're, you know, using stuff, it should be the outside of your hand. And, you know, we're doing a lot of this on the insides of our hands versus the outsides, right? Straight out versus, this is like going to, oh my gosh. See, there's so much to discuss, because doing stuff with these thumbs, I've talked about before, the thumbs don't really do much. The thumbs work in conjunction with the fingers as like an anchor, and the fingers do all the work. The thumbs should just be like an anchor or a brace, like to put against the fingers. And we're using the thumbs, which is so far, like if you look at straight out from my hand, the thumb is clear over here, and we're like putting all this emphasis on the thumbs, pushing us into, I know my hands are going in, but my shoulder up here is going external, right? So yeah, man, that's really beautiful. These little things that we use, right? These little pieces of technology I was discussing, that's really what's doing it. And I'm so aware of that. I've been aware of that since the very start. I know that I don't mention cell phones very much at all within In The Image Clothing Company, and I'm not trying to claim that the positions that the body is in is only because of clothing. I have known since the very start, since very start, that it's much more than that. I mean, I went a couple months with no phone at all. Yeah, at all. Like, not even touching a cell phone for a couple months here this year. A lot of that was a lot of learning. So the point is, I'm very fully aware of the effect of cell phones, and I have some very, 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 very little nuanced type knowledge and understanding of ways to make a cell phone more ergonomic to what we can with the shape that it is. But I just don't like to discuss technology, right? Not that I never will, and maybe one day I'll make a video, more videos, because I've discussed them in other videos, but maybe, you know, maybe we'll get into it more in the future, but not that there's really a future, but you know what I mean, just down the road, whatever it was. I just don't like to put the emphasis on something that we shouldn't be using that much in the first place. So I just don't want anybody thinking, not for like my sake, but for your people's sake, people get upset. He thinks it's all about clothing, and it's what about the phones, and look at the hand people are doing. Yeah, I know. I'm not trying to mock anybody. It's just that, I mean, I know the human body. There's a lot that I don't know. I'm not trying to be a know-it-all, but I don't want to, you know, I don't want to put the focus in the wrong spot, you know? And not that that's what would be happening if I did discuss cell phones more than I have been, but, you know, I always talk about things that come and go, and this is one of them. I mean, who knows how long we're going to have cell phones, because, I mean, we could end up being any kind of thing, Tony Stark type stuff, towards like, you know what I mean? I'm just saying, like, things change within the world, and cell phones are worldly things. Clothing is always on us, and it has an entirely different function than cell phones do, even though they have a lot of good functionality to them. Like I discussed, that's what I'm using now to film this with. That's what I use to, yeah, organize In The Image Clothing Company on the internet, as I have been up until today's date. So they are great tools, but they're not always going to be shaped how they are or look how they are, and they're not going to alter our bodies the way that they are currently altering them always, because in the past phones were shaped differently. We also had phones, just in different ways. So it's something that just changes, right? So my mind's in the right spot with that, and that's not some kind of like, but it is, right? Yeah, that's why I don't discuss phones more than I have been. So yeah, anyway, thank you.